So I was just thinking about how podcasting really changed my ability to level up. There were so many things that I was thinking about in my practice that would come up with clients, and or just how I was running the practice. And the podcast really allowed me to explore this on just like a much deeper level. And so one thing I did is I put together this podcast, but then also took some time to think about that process of starting a podcast. And I've put a ton over at podcastlaunchschool.com as a way to just help therapists that want to start a podcast. We have a bunch of services over there if you're looking to go full tilt. But honestly, just starting a podcast, learning about it, we have tons over at podcastlaunchschool.com, and we'd love for you to check it out. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1400.
Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. My name is Melissa Schneider, LCSW, and I'm here with an exciting guest today, Kelsey Blahnik. I'll tell you a little bit about her first. She's an LCSWS, which is a licensed clinical social worker, group practice owner, and she's the founder of the And Way Therapy, an OCD and trauma specialty practice based in Dripping Springs and Austin, Texas. She is the creator of the And Way model and author of the And Way, Assertive Peacemaking in a Divided World, a speaker, clinical supervisor, and a passionate advocate for correct OCD and misophonia diagnoses and evidence-based treatment. Kelsey, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It was great to meet you at our group practice conference.
Yes.
Connect.
Yes. So I had so much fun chatting with you. I think I had come over to you because you had been talking about your book and some other things. And then I learned that you had this very niche specialty practice, which always piques my interest as a group practice owner, because there's, I think, some fear and tension there, right? Like, everyone says it's good to be a specialist, but what happens like month one? You know, if I niche down and I'm saying no to half my callers, like, do I kill my practice, right? So I'm really excited to have you on to tell us all about it. So maybe just kick us off with like, what got you started in group practice? Tell us a little bit about your book, just a little bit of your journey.
Sure. So I started my practice in, I believe, 2018 as an individual practitioner. Right after the Parkland shooting, I was living in Florida. I was feeling especially convicted to try and create accessible mental health care because there's a lot of talk about gun reform and mental health reform, and I wanted both. And so I was seeing in community mental health prior to that there was either a lot of people that I knew as social workers that were in community mental health and were really burnt out. Their caseloads were really high, but that care was affordable. Or I knew clinicians who had really high self-pay rates, and those clinicians that I knew had some balance to their lives. And I thought, well, there's got to be something in between that I can create.
Yes,
and
a better model.
Yes, I wanted some high quality and affordable care at the same time. And so I sought out to be able to accept insurance, even though it's so difficult to navigate, and have a range of self-pay rates, and to be able to eventually work on my book that I was really passionate about, and just in general, really try to create more psychological flexibility in the world. So that's what my book is all about, is how do we navigate tough topics, including politics, and use psychological flexibility. And my practice was born out of this idea of finding something in between and trying to create accessible, high quality care. And about 3 years ago, I decided that in order to make my book, in order to kind of step away from my clinical role all the time, I need to have my business still running. And so I started the group practice element for that reason and started hiring clinicians. And it also allows me to kind of have that ripple effect of teaching psychological flexibility to all my supervisees and all my team members, and they can keep seeing clients. I still do see some clients, just less than I used to. And then, now the group practice is working even as I was putting out my book and started doing, speaking around and going around doing conferences and things like that.
Wow. And so tell our listeners, what is psychological flexibility to you? I remember thinking that was a very interesting way to word this concept.
Yes, it's the And Way model is all about not finding these two extremes and looking at most questions, most problems as either or our
Hmm.
identity as either or, looking both internally and externally at all these possibilities in between. Like we don't have to get stuck in one camp or the other as red or blue, black or white, all or nothing. And I was working a lot with eating disorders and disordered eating behaviors as it
Hmm.
overlapped with OCD. And that psychological flexibility concept was constantly coming up because of our need to not
Interesting.
look at food as just about nutrition or pleasure, that it can be both, or looking at our bodies as like a before and after picture, that or exercise as an all or nothing. It only
Hmm.
counts if I get a full hour. Just finding all these opportunities for flexibility where we can say there are
Interesting.
options in between. And from an OCD perspective, there are all these ways that things can count. There are all these things that are still valuable, even if we're not at the extremes.
I love that. And so let's dive in to how you decided to build a niche practice. So, because I believe in the beginning, maybe you had a broader practice, or maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, yes.
What motivated you to transition from a generalist to an OCD specialty practice? And tell us the story of that early transition.
The thing that really prompted me was when I had to actually create a website and really narrow down for myself, what do the clients that I most enjoy working with tend to see in our work together and tend to benefit the most from, or tend to say that they appreciate the most from the type of therapist I am. And when I had to get down to the nitty gritty of that kind of marketing mindset that I'd never used before, I realized that there is something really specific that I get really excited about when I work with clients with
Hmm.
OCD, is that they often get this aha moment when they learn about the OCD cycle, when they receive that psychoeducation, and when their family members start to learn about OCD and they start to behave differently in their home and their relationships. And then my clients feel so empowered and so excited that they finally have something explained. They can finally put words to what's been going
Yes.
on to them, and they feel so capable once they get into this treatment protocol that's actually working. So many of my clients are people who had already done therapy in other settings and did a more traditional CBT or anxiety route and hadn't used some of these evidence-based practices for OCD because they didn't know it was OCD, not anxiety. And so when
Hmm.
they get to experience it for the first time, you can just see their minds blown. They're so excited that they can do something effective, and they can feel confident that when they're investing in therapy, it's going to lead somewhere. So that's what I realized over the course of time when I was making that website, and started to get more and more niched. And the more I started supervising folks, I realized that's where my expertise really was as well. And I had more people on my
Hmm.
team starting to get fascinated by it. More people on my team started investing in OCD education. And so now we've come out on the other side, really specializing in branding that way.
That's so neat. As a side note, do you have a favorite OCD training if people are going to invest in a course?
When people were are very first learning about OCD, I used to have this training I really liked on simple practice learning, and they got rid of it,
Oh,
which is such a
no.
bummer. I know. So I actually created a course, and it's available on my website with a just kind of OCD 101 on
Hmm.
handwaytherapy.com, and I'm an ASWB provider, so those CEUs should count across the board.
Cool.
I'm also a huge fan of IOCDF.org, the International OCD Foundation. They have a ton of free resources and wonderful groups and a provider directory that we're a part of, and tons of people are a part of. And you have to have had OCD training to get listed on there. So they do their due diligence about making sure people are on there appropriately. And then I'm also a fan of, if you're for those that are in Texas like I am, OCD Texas is another great group trying to promote education, and they do a lot of either free or affordable trainings and free consultation as well.
That's great. And for our listeners, we'll make sure that all of these links are in the show notes. So if you want to check out Kelsey's course, if you want to check out the organizations she mentioned, I always love starting with the right education, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you made the decision to accept insurance in a world where a lot of specialty practices go cash pay only, for some of the reasons you mentioned. What was the thinking behind it, and what does it cost you financially and operationally to hold that position?
Oh, a lot. It is a huge burden. It's been very, very, very difficult. And there's always the unmeasurable, the immeasurable risk that's also in that all the time because we don't know at what point insurance is going to give us grief. So aside
Hmm,
from the
yes.
administrative cost, there's the risk, the liability there that we just never know when they're going to decide to change things. And we operationally, we're always having to adapt with things like making sure we're increasing measurement tools this year and suddenly
Hmm.
and really needing to justify 90837s in a way that 5 years ago you didn't have to be as intentional about. And with ERP, it's so important with exposure and response prevention. It's so important to have as long of a session as you can for a client to really
Hmm.
have the chance to escalate and de-escalate. And so we're always navigating that. It's very difficult, and yet it's worth it because that accessibility really allows people to have the frequency that they need for care. And for a modality like ERP, we also use ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. We also use ICBT. And then because we're this OCD and trauma blend, we use a lot of EMDR, IFS once OCD is stabilized
Hmm.
enough to go there. ERP and EMDR in particular are just modalities that really benefit from frequency and
Yes.
long enough sessions. And so that allows us to offer that to our clients without coming into that ethical dilemma of pressuring the client in a way that they financially can't afford to make happen. So that's why it's continued to be a priority. I also do, I just about probably 3 months ago saw a really interesting statistic and this whole dashboard actually that heard a company that I don't even, I'm not even a customer of theirs, but I saw this presentation that they made about the insurance practices and the private pay practices, and that in 2025 the private pay practices ended up spending about the difference in what they made on marketing. And I thought that
I
was
can
pretty,
believe that. Yeah.
I thought that was pretty wild to see that. And it kind of, for the first time, I went, well, maybe this isn't just, a burden and a sacrifice. Maybe this is also a wash at the end of the day, that this is creating access for my clients, but it's not actually financially costing me as much as I did now. The emotional and energetic side of things, I don't know. I think that's still pretty costly.
Yes. Yes. You do feel a little
but
bit hostage.
but that did make me feel a little bit better about it from a business standpoint.
That's so. I'd love to see that. I love Heard. I did a show with their
Great.
CEO like a month ago, just to ask about their private practice data, because they're one of the few speaking into the field with facts and numbers. But that would be an
Hmm.
interesting one to look at. It was always an argument I made because we had a in-network group practice and an out-of-network group practice. But I was like, at least with an insurance-based practice, the problems are solvable and have answers. If you're struggling to market an out-of-network practice, you can spend a ton of money on a solution that does nothing for you. It's not
Mm.
as straightforward. You have to be savvy enough to like choose your marketing channels, and so I'm not at all surprised because marketing costs are just like 2 or 3xing every year, it feels like. So
Yes,
that's
it's so
good.
true. It's so true. And I think that the OCD specialty for me came from such an authentic place because I am really passionate about it. And the more people I saw feel that moved by being aware of what's going on for them, the more excited I got and the more that, kept that momentum going. And then my marketing is authentic. It's like, oh, I can't wait to educate the community. I'm really passionate about this. And that makes such a difference. Then my clinical brain doesn't, the marketing doesn't come naturally. So just trying to market for the sake of marketing just doesn't hit, and
Yes.
instead we're able to really emphasize community awareness, education about OCD, and making sure, other referral partners, other providers know how to differentiate or know to come to us in order to differentiate between OCD and anxiety. And then those are great partnerships we're able to make.
I love that. And I always valued the access to care too, right? You want people to be able to stay for a year and a half if that's what it takes, because OCD can be a slower nut. So this might be a perfect lead in. You've mentioned ERP, you've mentioned EMDR, some other modalities. Why does specialization matter for OCD and trauma?
Yes. Oh, it's a great question. It's because when OCD and anxiety are treated the same, and we use a lot of really effective methods for anxiety, like traditional talk therapy and CBT, unfortunately, that can exacerbate symptoms with OCD. So, overanalyzing, replaying, even with EMDR, replaying a memory, those
Oh,
things can
interesting.
actually yeah, it can actually exacerbate symptoms, and it can allow therapy to feel like the short-term relief in the OCD cycle. And then clients are kind of craving and relying on the therapy 50 minutes, the therapy hour, as
Hmm.
their way for getting reassurance, and then feel more reliant on it, dependent on it. And instead of it becoming a thing where they're reducing frequency and becoming more and more independent, they're more dependent on the process.
That's so interesting. Meaning, like the CBT approaches might actually exacerbate your OCD symptoms because they kind
Absolutely.
of fit into that like repetitive ritual. I
Yes,
could see that making a
absolutely.
lot of sense. So tell us, for a lot of group practice owners, niching down to one specialty area can feel really scary, right? Will it kill the business? Will their staff need to shrink? Will they have to right size? Walk us through the financial and business impact in those first couple of months after you made the switch. Did you lose clinicians? Did referrals slow down? Were you actually turning clients away if they didn't fit the specialty? Tell us what happened.
I think because we went from a generalist to a specialty practice, we already had clinicians that could still meet the needs of clients who reached out for other things. And I just accepted the idea that there's no way any one practice is going to meet all needs. And so we might as well do what we're doing really well. And so we do have to refer out for some things, just like hopefully everyone does, because we can't all be specialists of all the things. And yet we do have a few people who maintain a more generalist stance, making sure that everybody's still OCD competent, that they're able to, notice and differentiate and make the proper referral. Whereas we have some, the majority of our clinicians are EMDR trained. The majority of our clinicians are really specialized in this OCD work in particular, and they're ready to take on that OCD and trauma overlap. So that was part of what helped us transition. I think the only potential pushback or negative thing that I could say is worth paying attention to is if some of your practitioners aren't up for that, or are saying, oh, that's not really the population I ideally want to work with, then creating a way for them to still do the kind of work that they want to do, which for us, we've got a couple of clinicians that I mentioned are a little more generalist, and that they're not saying, the population I mainly want to work with is OCD. They really specialize in ADHD, and there's a lot of overlap with OCD and ADHD, and there's
Yes.
in ASD, and so we can make those appropriate referrals at different times, or we can say, okay, this client really wants to work with somebody on EMDR, so they can go to this clinician for that during that season. We've also had a really wonderful embrace from all of the therapists of this transition. So I'm thankful that it has been so positive. I know that if our practice was larger at the time of that transition, it could go differently in different settings.
Hmm.
But I think we were just at the right place, the right size, and it worked very well. In terms of having clients come to us, we found that it really actually helped us. It really worked out very well that people know us as the OCD and trauma specialty group in our community. And so if they think of, they know somebody who has anxiety, they know somebody who has depression, they maybe have 10 different people they could send them to. When OCD is mentioned, they know that we're the go-to. And so
Hmm.
I think that that's really helped us in terms of referrals.
That makes so much sense. And I had just learned in the last year as I was rereading sort of the neurodiversity section in the DSM that I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense that we're like grouping OCD in with ADHD and even autism spectrum, like just things where your brain works differently, right?
Yes,
And you're
yes,
wired a little
absolutely.
differently and that there's so much overlap.
Yes, yes.
That's fascinating.
Something I hear over and over from practice owners in the practice academy is the one class I never was taught in grad school was how to run my business. And honestly, I felt that same thing. It's not a personal failing, but it's a gap in how we train clinicians. You build something that's real, your private practice, and nobody handed you a playbook for intake, billing, team management, or what it actually takes to scale past a handful of clinicians. That's what Valent is built for. Valent is the EHR designed exclusively for behavioral health group practices. With 2 decades of experience, 13 million clients engaging in their EMR, and 28,000 providers using their platform, Valent offers the tools that close the gap in your documentation, billing, and operations. Also, they include AI that handles the admin work so that your team will stay focused on your clients. Valent created a free interactive resource specifically for group practice owners like you. It's called Breaking Through the Growth Ceiling. It's called Breaking Through the Growth Ceiling. In literally 5 minutes, it pinpoints your biggest bottleneck right now with a 90-day playbook to fix it. It is awesome. So if you want to break through the ceiling of growth that you feel like you just haven't been able to break through, grab that for free over at valent.io/Joe. That's valent.io/Joe. Valent is spelled VALANT.io/Joe.
Tell us when you did this, maybe your first 3 or 6 months, did revenue drop or grow? And then maybe like a year later, like what was the result? Did it feel like it worked? Did profits go up? Tell us how it worked out financially to do this specialty focus.
Yes, growth, absolutely. It's also hard to parse apart the fact that at the same time I was also growing my brand personally of the Ann Way, and I wrote my book and started touring and doing speaking engagements and getting ASWB approved to do these courses online. So I think separating those is hard, but I absolutely know from an inquiry standpoint, knowing how many of our referrals are specific to OCD, I know that has helped us, and I know that has definitely shifted tremendously in the last even just 12 months. The last 12 months, our referrals have shifted to being predominantly for OCD,
Hmm.
and I think it's definitely helped us grow.
That's so neat. Well, and I should have asked about some dates. So tell me, when did you make the switch and how many people were on your team at that point?
Yes, probably about 2 years ago, we started shifting toward we actually created this new website and shifted toward my specialty being branded this way. And then only about a year ago did we make this shift as a practice. And we had originally 2 years ago, we only had about 4 of us. And then a year ago, I think there were 10 of us.
Wow. So there's been a lot of growth,
A
even
lot
just
of
in the
growth.
staff.
Yeah, so there's 12 of us now, and 3 years ago it was just me. So
Wow. That's pretty amazing. So it sounds like you would recommend specializing.
I would recommend specializing if someone is really passionate about their specialty and there is truly a need for that specialty in their community. Otherwise, I think niching down for the sake of niching is not necessarily what I'd recommend, because there are tons of people niching in trauma, for example, or tons of people niching
Yes.
in anxiety. And I think that there are certain diagnoses, or there are certain communities where having a niche for the sake of that could actually leave out groups that you could be referred to. So I think that's a delicate situation. I wouldn't go straight to that. But I think if you notice a need in your community and you're passionate about trying to solve it, then that's when a specialty practice is a really great fit.
And I like what you said about your energy and excitement for it, that was how you chose the niche. Because I would
Yes.
definitely agree. I wouldn't just think like, what's going to sell well? But if
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know that, you could like get on a soapbox and talk about this thing all day, I
Exactly.
think, yeah, I think that it really comes through in the marketing, like you were saying, and the speaking. And I'd love to ask you about kind of your other revenue streams in another moment. Um, okay, so I have 2 more questions about the niching down experience. So we kind of know that group practices live and die by referral volume. How did you build a referral pipeline while the specialty was narrowing? Were there kind of marketing tricks? Were you doing like a press release?
Mhm.
Did you find referral partners in the community? Tell us what has worked for you.
Yes. So we have a monthly newsletter, and we've been building our mailing list. I think that helps as you continue to even just notify your clientele that that's where the practice is headed, and that you're hiring new clinicians, or there are ways to keep even, sharing resources about OCD for free for these clients, so they know, you can come to us for all of those needs as well. And then trying to include other therapists and other partners. We have a separate newsletter for our, not just referral partners, but all colleagues. So I have a therapist newsletter
Hmm.
because I, do my courses and have my book as well. There are therapists that are kind of following along for that information, but that's also a way that we're able to share what's going on in our practice. I think the biggest opportunity has been our community psychoeducation, of going.
Hmm.
We go around to offices. I wish I had some right around here. Do I not? Nope, this one's not. I have these branded Clorox wipes that say OCD is not just about germs, and there's a
Oh,
little
I
bit of
love that.
info on there and our QR code, and we drop those off with doctors' offices as a way to try and bust some of those myths around OCD, and
So
just kind of
clever.
create an opening for some conversation. So there's a gift, and then the education is a gift too. That I hope, when you go around to a primary care provider and they're constantly seeing mental health crises in their offices, but they
Sure.
didn't even know. We're in a rural county, so they didn't even know that there's something that they should be treating or referring differently about OCD. That's an
Hmm.
opportunity to treat their patients better. And so people are very open to that and excited about that. I don't ever feel like I'm, selling something that they don't need. I know that this is beneficial to their patients and will make their lives easier. So it feels like an easy opportunity to connect, and it's genuine. And I'll invite them to do little educational moments. And just right after this, in an hour, I've got another community event where we're just sharing with anybody who, this one in particular is also for any individuals or loved ones who want to learn more about the
Hmm.
difference between OCD and anxiety. And our flyer is something like, is it anxiety, is it something else, let's talk. And just talking about sticky thoughts and intrusive thinking and how that could be something different than anxiety. So all those education opportunities, I think, are our best ways of creating that referral pipeline. And it just comes from such an easy place because it's what we care about.
That's so great. And is this like a webinar, or are you going to a community event?
I host it, a community event here in our town in Hayes County, and then I'll go around to other offices and do this. Any of the other group practices in the area, I'm always offering. I'd come to your practice. I'd go, virtually. I'd go anywhere in Austin, and then I'd be happy to do
Right.
it for any practices that want to learn about this, because I mean, even just in 30 minutes, there's a lot that you can take with you in order to differentiate. And then we've establish that line of communication. So if individual providers want to reach out, they can take our course, or they can reach out for professional consultation, and we can keep that relationship going from there.
I love that. It feels very, I love that you're thinking about education, not just for the community or the clients, but also other therapists, doctors' offices. That just makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
And I was even thinking, this is like an old number that is probably wrong now, but I remember reading that the incident rate of OCD was maybe like 1% of the population. And so it sounds like you're finding a lot of this 1%. It feels like they're very, there is a big population to serve, as opposed to something like couples counseling, where you're like, don't at least a third of us need that every year.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's interesting that even with a pretty small group, when you're niching down, that there's such a need.
Yes, and they're just OCD patients are being missed because
Well,
the
exactly. I was like,
average
I'm
is.
sure that 1% is like old.
Yes, yeah. I think the statistic that I've most recently seen is about 1 in 40 people deal with OCD. And the really wild statistic to me is that by from the time that there's an onset of symptoms, it usually takes people over 14 years before they get an effective treatment, because people end up
Wow.
getting hopped around to different providers, or it's treated as a medical concern, or it's dismissed, to just let it go, especially Puro, any of these obsessional focuses that don't have something really visible, like washing, the traditional things you
Yes.
think of, the stereotypical things of washing your hands or checking the lock. But it's not always visible. There are a lot of mental compulsions people engage in, from reassurance or replaying. And so if that keeps being treated as anxiety, then it gets ignored, or it gets over treated and mistreated.
Wow. So 14 years from knowing that you have OCD to actually receiving care that helps to manage it.
Yes, yes.
That's awful. We need you,
Average.
Kelsey.
Oh, yes, we need this. We need this, especially in our rural communities. Austin is there are a lot of really great organizations like OCD Texas that are really trying to improve the education out there. We've got the conference IOCDF conference every year is available virtually, so people can
Hmm.
also join that way and learn about the most up and coming research there. And then I'm a huge fan of this. There's a self compassion workbook for OCD that you can find online.
Hmm.
Huge fan of that. Space is another great method to look into for parents and for kiddos who want to be educated in how they can support children and adolescents. There's so many great resources out there.
That's amazing. So let's kind of, as we're winding down, talk a little bit about your book, right? So you focus in your book on how mental rigidity is the root of most human suffering and conflict. And I'm curious, how does that show up in OCD specifically? And how does treating OCD actually connect to this bigger vision about psychological flexibility and healing?
Yeah, so much of OCD is rooted in shame and doubt, and so there's a lot of
Hmm.
seeking certainty, a lot of seeking a final answer. Am I good or bad? Is what I'm doing right or wrong? Is it right to be on this medication, and seeking the reassurance and needing to be 100% on this choice, or being in the right relationship, or the scrupulosity around being a good enough uh, you know, in terms of your religion, or a good enough partner, or a good enough student. And all the perfectionism that can come with that. And so building flexibility around that allows so much
Hmm.
expansion for people to move toward their values, spend their time and energy the way that they really want to, connecting with someone rather than getting stuck in that pattern, that cyclical thinking. And so I think that experience with OCD is what led me toward this journey of writing my book in a lot of ways. And my experience with food and treating disordered eating behaviors definitely had a big part in that as well. And then
Hmm.
I started to see it in terms of politics, that we are so quick to put ourselves in one camp or the other when we're all
Hmm.
complex human beings. And there are all these competing impulses within me, and I don't 100% agree with probably any candidate I've ever voted for, even
Right.
though I could, wear a shirt and stand on the side of the road with a sign and be a big fan. I still know they're going to choose to do things that I disagree with when they're in office, or if they don't get in office. And so being willing to acknowledge that complexity and
Hmm.
imperfection in myself and in candidates and in others allows for so much more compassion and curiosity in our relationships. So that's what my book is all about, is how do we develop that flexibility and complexity when we look at ourselves, and that allows us to do that with other people, so that we can figure out how to navigate all these relationships in such a divided world, when we're being told to close the door on relationships immediately when someone doesn't agree with us.
Wow. That's a big idea, and I resonate with so much of what you said. I often find activism amazing as in theory, and then when you kind of go and try to get involved, you're like, oh my gosh, people are like, very much vilifying the other side, and it's just not how we think as therapists. We're usually like, well, let's make sure we have like the full perspective on what might be going on or what might be motivating your enemy. Is Are they really an enemy? So I love
Yeah.
that whole approach. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so Kelsey, thanks so much for being here. Tell me again, if people want to work with you, make a referral to you, what are the one or two places they should start with?
Yeah, so we are in Texas and Florida, virtual across both states. And then we have an office in Austin, Texas, and you can reach out to theandwaytherapy.com. If you go to our contact us page, you can get scheduled right away. And then we also have an Instagram, The And Way Therapy. I have my own The And Way Instagram for anything related to my book and that focus on peace building. And you can also find my book and information about my speaking availability on theandwaypress.com. And I have my courses on theandwaytherapy.com if any therapists are interested in learning more about OCD, or about sustaining burnout, or sustaining passion instead of landing in burnout, and about politics, ethics, and therapy, and how complicated that can be.
Wow, that's so exciting. You've done a lot. Well, I just really want to thank you so much for being with us. I want to thank our listeners for joining us today. I'm your host, Melissa Schneider, and I'll be doing a monthly show on the podcast, so look out for more episodes from me exploring the big trends in our industry, digging into solo and group practice, looking at the numbers, and always zeroing in on practical tips for how you can thrive in your solo or group practice. If you want to consult with me for anything practice related, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/apply to get connected and find out if consulting is right for you. If you have comments or thoughts about this episode or ideas for what you'd like to see on the show, shoot me an email, melissa@practiceofthepractice.com. So lastly, I just want to say a big thank you to our sponsor of today's show.
Hey, special thanks to Valent today for sponsoring this show. They put together an amazing resource. It's going to take you 5 minutes to quickly evaluate what's stopping your growth. It's going to pinpoint your biggest bottlenecks right now and give you a 90-day playbook to fix it. You can download that totally free over at valent.io/Joe. That's VALANT.io/Joe to grab that resource. Thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.